You have no idea what it's like to grow up without your father, without knowing who your people are, where you come from, what diseases run in your family, what proclivities run in your bloodline, what generational curses you need to fight against in the spirit.
This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Operation Anteater, Part 2. When we left off, the round table had begun. The heads, their right hands, generals, and individuals who'd been summoned to the round table had all provided their debriefs around various assignments, plots, and attacks involving the International Trafficking Organization. And LJ was providing a debrief around how Mom Joyce ended up in the hands of Noah Kirk, the head honcho of that organization. When Mom Joyce discovered that Regina had been in communication with her biological father, she was hot as fish grease. She got his number out of Regina's phone and contacted him herself. When he verified that the person who was texting him was in fact Regina's mother, he decided to hedge his bets. One of the two women were going to be his ticket out of the country, and if he was lucky, he'd get a little revenge in the process. What neither of the women knew was that LJ was already on it. He knew how she thought, so he already knew that she was going to take it upon herself to try and save the day. He knew she'd be embarrassed by her connection to the head of an international trafficking organization.
And in an effort to make it clear that she was not aligned with him,
he'd try and outsmart a man who'd spent decades of his life using, manipulating, trapping, and trafficking women. So he knew if he didn't keep an eye on Regina and get his hands on Noah Kirk before she did, his children could very well be burying their mother. He could not have anticipated was Mom Joyce throwing her hat in the ring. As LJ walked through all of the things that had occurred over the last few weeks, he thought to himself, I should have known. Like mother, like daughter. And as he explained to the men and women assembled around the round table, that Mom Joyce continued her communications with Noah Kirk over several days. At the conclusion of those discussions, she'd agreed to meet him. She'd negotiated a deal with him that if he would leave her baby girl alone, she'd do whatever he asked. And he asked her to shake her security and meet him at a designated location. Mom Joyce was no dummy. She knew that the writing was on the wall. Noah Kirk had to get out of the country. He was going to attempt to use her to do it. And if she didn't play the situation just right, she might never see her daughter and her grandchildren again. If he was going to double cross her, she was going to triple cross him.
she learned from Miss Bernie's death that
In order to do this, she had to be all in. She had to be willing to lose her own life to save the lives of the people she loved. But if that was going to happen, Noah Kirk couldn't get away. So while she was at Angela and Stephanie's estate, facilitating Regina's visit with her 3 children, she jumped in one of the soldiers' vehicles and drove off the property. She knew that that particular soldier had a habit of leaving his key fob inside his assigned vehicle.
so the doors would be unlocked.
And all she had to do was hit the push to start, and it was on. Completely caught off guard, several soldiers scrambled to their vehicles, and the lieutenant assigned to the property told them to follow her. As soon as the vehicle was in motion, Mom Joyce called LJ. And when the call connected, she said, now, baby, I know you're not going to be too happy with this, but I had to do what I had to do. I don't know if you know it, but Regina's been in contact, LJ said, with her father, I know. Where are you going? Mom Joyce said, well, that was fast. Tell your soldiers to back off. I want to keep them all safe. LJ said, that's not happening. Where are you going? Mom Joyce said, I'm going to meet him.
Don't worry, you can track me.
LJ said, you have gotten yourself into a situation that you are not going to be able to get out of. You're not going to make it to that meetup spot. Keep your eyes on the road. They're going to intercept you. Try your best to avoid a collision. You're going to be taken, Mom Joyce. You want to be taken conscious. And then LJ gave her as much instruction as he possibly could before she and the caravan of soldiers who were following her were intercepted. Mom Joyce followed all of the instructions that LJ had given her. She managed to avoid a collision, grabbed her purse, stepped out of the vehicle with her hands raised while yelling to the Lopez soldiers to stand down. For all appearances, it seemed that they were following her commands. But the truth was that LJ had already put the word out. Mom Joyce was going to be snatched, willingly, and they would have to let it happen. And when Mom Joyce got in the back seat of the vehicle driven by Noah Kirk's men, on the outside, she was cool as a fan. and thanking God that she had called LJ, because she had no idea how she would have handled being cut off by goons in a staged accident intended to incapacitate her, being caught up in a gunfight that would have absolutely ensued, and being manhandled and taken God only knew where. So as soon as the vehicle left the scene of the interception, Mom Joy said, "Call your boss right now." When the goon who was driving said, "You ain't calling the shots, old lady," Mom Joy said, "Little boy, watch your mouth and check your mirrors." And when the goon did, he realized that the other vehicles in his party had just been intercepted themselves. He said, "What the hell?" Mom Joy said, "Call your boss." And the goon complied. When Noah Kirk's voice came over the Bluetooth speaker in the vehicle, Mom Joy said, "I am not the naive girl you fooled over 40 years ago. If I was lost in the woods and I had to choose between a bear and you, I would absolutely choose the damn bear. You didn't have to go through all of this. I would have come to wherever you wanted me to be." Noah Kirk chuckled and said, "It wasn't about trying to trick you, Joyce. It was about trying to outsmart your son-in-law and his little friends. I figured whether you told them what you were up to or not, they'd keep you under constant surveillance, making it difficult for me to get out of Dodge. This was just a little security measure, if you will." Mom Joyce said, "I bet. Now where the hell is this man taking me?" Noah Kirk said, "Now I'm not nearly as trusting as you'd like for me to be. Go ahead and toss that purse out the window. But before you do, empty your pockets, remove all your jewelry, your shoes, socks, and your bra." Mom Joyce said, "For what?" Noah Kirk said, "This is not my first rodeo with the Notorious Five Families." When Mom Joyce arrived at the private airstrip in Houston, where the goon had driven her, Noah Kirk was waiting for her inside a private jet. When the goons escorted her onto that jet, Noah Kirk gave her a once-over and then he said, "I told you to let her keep the medicine, not the medicine bag." The goon who had driven her there said, "I checked it. I pulled the lining and everything. There wasn't nothing in it." Noah Kirk said, "I don't think you understand who we're dealing with. Take the medicine bottles out of the bag. Drive the bag somewhere, ditch it, and come back." Mom Joyce didn't even protest. She just smirked. And Noah Kirk asked, "Do I need you to pour them pills into Ziploc bags and get rid of the pill cases too?" Mom Joyce said, "Do whatever you need to do, Noah. I'm not a part of some plot to catch you slipping. I understand why you would think so, though. Like I've been telling you, my only goal is to get you to leave my daughter and my grandchildren alone. I don't give a damn how that's accomplished. You need me to travel with you so that you can get out of the country? Fine. Just go away and don't ever come back. Don't ever contact Regina again. And forget whatever you know about those children." Noah Kirk said, "I don't give a damn about Regina or them damn children, and you know that. You're going to be hard-pressed to convince me that you're not here for revenge." Mom Joyce said, "Revenge? Revenge for what?" "Oh, you think that I've been spending the better part of my life bent out of shape and butthurt because the 14-year-old version of me was foolish enough to believe that a man who was nearly twice her age actually saw her as a woman, loved and valued her, was planning to leave his wife for her. And when the game that he was playing stopped being fun, he cashed in his chips and walked away. Is that what you think?" Yeah, you got me messed up. I tell you what, let's go ahead and get all of the past out of the way so we can get to wherever it is that we're going and you can go away. Because I'm not going to try to convince you of a damn thing. I can show you better than I can tell you." Noah said, "We got plenty of time to work through hurt feelings. I'm not the man that I was all them years ago. I know that I owe you an apology in recompense for all of the years that you spent." Mom Joyce said, "Cut the BS. Yeah, you fooled me all those years ago, but you were not the only one. Obviously, I fooled myself. Neither of us were innocent, but you were the adult. You took advantage of an opportunity, because that's what opportunists do. And in my naivete, I thought more highly of myself and of you than I should have. That's on me and my parents. I've made peace with that, and I have no regrets. It took a lot of time, a lot of work, a whole lot of soul cleansing. So I'm not here for revenge, repentance, or reconciliation. You said one thing that was true. You are not the man that you were all them years ago. You're worse. And since I'm obviously too old for your taste, we can skip all the niceties and you can stop making googly eyes at me like you seeing a juicy steak. You're not interested and I am not flattered. Noah Kirk chuckled and said, Little Joyce, all grown up. Mom Joyce said, Noah Kirk, who did not age well. Now, when is this plane taking off? The sooner we can get to wherever we going and I can get the hell away from you, the better. You owe me nothing. And you have absolutely nothing that I want other than for you to forget that my daughter ever made contact with you. She is the best thing that came from the mistakes we made. Noah gave instruction to his staff and patted the seat next to him while thinking that nothing about this meetup had gone the way that he'd expected or planned. This was precisely why he liked younger women. Their behavior and their mouths were a whole lot easier to control. And to his dismay, but not contrary to his expectations, Mom Joyce completely ignored the seat that he'd patted and chose a seat on the other side of the plane diagonal to where he was sitting. Testing his luck, he said, I don't bite. And Mom Joyce said, I do. Noah Kirk chuckled, and Mom Joyce did not. After a brief silence, Noah said, Tell me, Joyce, how exactly did you pull it off? When Mom Joyce asked what he was referring to, Noah Kirk said, How did you manage to completely disappear from the planet, give birth, and raise a child on your own, off the radar and the beaten path? And Mom Joyce said, God. At the round table, while LJ was going through the details of Mom Joyce's pseudo-abduction, Angela had excused herself from the table. She'd heard the story already, and since she had nothing to add to it, she took that opportunity to go and check on her best friend, because Regina's debrief would be up next. Inside the small room where Regina had been waiting, Angela entered a code on the wall to disable the cameras, and then she asked, How you doing, best friend? Regina said, Nervous as hell. I don't understand why LJ couldn't just do my debrief. Angela said, Like I told you, since you were inserted in the plan, you have to report on your own doings. Regina asked, So I'm not going to have to explain how all of this got started? Angela said, No, you're going to have to explain that part. Regina said, This is embarrassing. Angela said, You know the feelings that led you to make the decisions that you made. No one in that room is going to ask you about those feelings, so you don't have to share them unless you want to. Regina asked, So I don't have to explain why I did what I did. Angela said, No, you're going to have to make it make sense. But this isn't a therapy session, so you don't have to tell them about your daddy issues, how you unfairly judged your mother for being a gullible child, or how you thought that if you could save the day, you'd be creating an avenue by which you could get your man back. Regina said, Wait, I never said all that. Angela said, You didn't have to. I know you. My point is no one else in that room knows you the way that I do. And no one else in that room is going to care about any of that. Their concern is whether you were trying to help your father get away. Regina said, That man was not my... Angela said, I know. He was your DNA contributor. Got it. Every person in that room is trained to assume the worst until evidence is provided to the contrary. The assumption is that you knew exactly who and what your father was, that you connected with him against the interest of the families, and that you were working with him to undermine the family's efforts to find and handle him. Regina said, Why would I do that? And how the hell is telling me that gonna help me calm down? Angela said, I know you wouldn't do that. And so do most of the people in that room. But I'm telling you that so that you know how to tell your story, where to put your focus, and so you understand why your version of the events are so important. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, LJ had just finished explaining the steps that he took after he got that phone call from Mom Joyce. LJ said, I had her have his goon call him so that she could have Noah Kirk tell her exactly where they were headed. Obviously, I had a tracker on her phone, but I knew that Noah Kirk didn't get in his position by being sloppy, and he'd have her dispose of any and everything that he believed could be used to track her whereabouts. Over the years, though, my mother-in-law had been paying attention, and she realized the same thing. So she hadn't gone into this situation blind. She'd had a trick up her own sleeve. The phone call was just smoke and mirrors. She needed Noah to believe that she believed she was in control, and that as long as she knew where she was going, she didn't need tracking devices or the team that was pursuing the vehicle. So once he told her where they were headed, she put her hand out the window and gave the soldiers a sign. In response, they stopped tailing the vehicle. I gave her strict orders not to ask him any questions, not to show any emotion, not to give him any energy that would give him any reason to suspect that she knew anything about his organization, the five families, the war that had been raging around her, or the business that he'd been in since before she'd ever made his acquaintance. I adamantly drove home the point that her behavior should suggest that all she knew about the entire situation was that Q worked for the feds and he'd been working with our PI firm to take down a criminal organization, of which Noah Kirk had been identified as the leader. Thus, he needed to get out of the country to avoid federal prosecution. It was also important that he not have any reason to suspect that we had another way to track her or that we were listening. And she did a bang-up job. Once I knew that the tracking device hadn't been found, I went into action, getting a team on the ground in Oregon, giving Regina an opportunity to tell me what she'd been up to. She had no idea that I had her phone bugged. I'd seen every text message she'd sent and received from Noah Kirk. She still doesn't know that. I used what she admitted to and got her to continue communicating with him. I had her communicate as if she was in fear of what he might do to her mother. I had her agree to whatever he demanded. And as expected, he used Mom Joyce's pseudo-abduction against her. He tried to convince Regina that her mother was in danger, that if she cooperated, her mother would be returned safe and sound. But Regina knew full well that her mother didn't have a care in the world. When the private plane landed in Oregon, Noah Kirk said, "We've been on this flight for over 4 hours, almost 5, and you haven't said a single word, refused to eat or drink anything, and you didn't even use the restroom. You cool as a damn fan. What's really going on here, Joyce?" Mom Joyce said, "I don't know what you mean. You wanted me to go with you to Oregon, and you said that I need to stay with you until you can get out of the country. I'm some kind of insurance policy. That shouldn't take long, right? I can eat and drink and go to the bathroom when I get home." Noah Kirk said, "You can't possibly think that this plane is about to turn around and take you back to Houston." Mom Joyce said, "Oh no, it needs to take me back to Dallas." Noah Kirk said, "We're going to be here for several days. I can't leave the country under my own name. There's paperwork and things that have to happen in order for me to actually get out of the country and be untraceable. You mean to tell me all the years Regina was married to LJ, you don't know how this works?" Mom Joyce said, "Why in the hell would I know how running from the FBI works? I'm not a criminal. You are. I figured you'd need a fake passport or something. But I also figured that you would have had all of that worked out before you cooked up this plan to get me to go with you to Nowheresville, Oregon." Noah Kirk said, "The situation is delicate. It isn't something that can be rushed. This isn't exactly how I planned to make my great escape. So I had to do some improvising. If the only people I had to worry about were the feds, I wouldn't have needed to go to these lengths." Mom Joyce said, "Well, what, you got some rival criminals that's looking for you too?" Noah Kirk said, "I find it hard to believe that you living on that heavily fortified compound in Denton, Texas, and you have no idea what's actually going on here." Mom Joyce said, "Well, humor me then and tell me what's going on." Noah Kirk said, "I'll pass. Loose lips, sink ships." Mom Joyce said, "Listen, I want to get out of whatever this is alive. I've lived a good life. So if this is how it ends, then this is how it ends. But my preference would be to go home and be with my daughter and my grandchildren. So I'm not pressing you to tell me a damn thing about whatever kind of crap you done got yourself into. And I don't care all that much about how you're going to get yourself out of it, as long as it does not include my daughter. That's the only reason I'm here. I'm not a threat to whatever you got going on. And if keeping it to yourself ensures that you don't see me as a threat, keep your mouth shut. You in your feelings because I lied to you about getting rid of the baby all them years ago. You're going to have to let that go. Because I'm not holding it against you that you weren't honest with me about who you were and what you were doing." Noah Kirk said, "I'm not upset with you for keeping the baby. My wife and I were never able to have children. And I wasn't 100% sure whether she was the problem or I was, since in the years that followed, I never had any other pregnancy scares. I figured you might have got missing because I wasn't the baby's father." Mom Joyce said, "So now I'm a hoe. Wait a minute. Were you trying to get my daughter to meet with you so you can get a DNA test?" Noah said, "No, I had that done years ago." Mom Joyce said, "How? When?" Noah said, "I have connections. My reach is long. So let's pretend that you're only here because you're concerned about Regina's safety." Mom Joyce said, "And her mental health. You have no idea what it's like to grow up without your father, without knowing who your people are, where you come from, what diseases run in your family, what proclivities run in your bloodline, what generational curses you need to fight against in the spirit. My daughter has 3 children who share your DNA, and she doesn't know what that means for her or for them. You haven't had to watch her live with that pain.
I have. Noah Kirk said, I see. Well, let me assure you that unless my plane doesn't make it into international airspace, you and Regina are both safe. When this is over, she'll have all the information she needs about my proclivities. And neither you nor our daughter. Mom Joyce said, she's not your daughter, she's mine. Noah Kirk said, biologically, she's my daughter too. And had you gotten rid of her, my bloodline would have ended. My brother was murdered before he had the opportunity to have any children. And every other woman who's even suggested that a baby she was carrying was mine didn't have the opportunity to slip through my hands like you did. I made sure those embryos didn't become fetuses. Mom Joyce just shook her head. She said, you are a worse person than I thought you were. Noah Kirk said, you don't know the half. But lucky for you, I'm thankful that my bloodline continues and those 3 beautiful grandchildren of ours. Mom Joyce said, they're not your grandchildren. Noah Kirk said, yeah. If all goes well, you'll be rid of me in 3 days. But I'm telling you now, if anything seems even remotely off, if there's a place in you that's bitter, vengeful, and looking for some get back, if you think that this is a chance for you to even the score, the men who are keeping an eye on our daughter are gonna do what you didn't 40-something years ago. Mom Joyce said, don't threaten me. Don't threaten my daughter. I don't know what kind of monster you are, but I ain't scared of monsters. I'm not holding a grudge because my heart is bigger than you could ever imagine. And over these years, God has done his biggest work on making me a better me. I've seen the good die young and evil people live to a ripe old age. But one thing I know is God don't play about me and mine. I ain't never needed to get nobody back because God comes through like a hurricane and he don't never tap out.